Every business dreams of being able to create more predictable success for their companies. Doing that has become increasingly challenging, especially in today's fast-changing and very unpredictable markets. But what if one CEO has figured out a way to get predictable and repeatable outcomes? I'm Jane Singer, and thank you for taking the time to join me here on A Seat at the Table, where we talk to leading executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators who share their insights, experience, and outlook on business, technology, and leadership. It's wonderful to have you as part of our international community that now includes industry professionals like you in over 100 countries. Today I'm talking with Thomas Douglas, CEO of JMark, an award-winning innovative IT solution provider. Tom has formulated processes that provide repeatable outcomes and a predictable revenue stream that place JMark on a very strong growth trajectory. Tom joined JMark in 1997 after serving in the Navy, where he was recognized with multiple awards. At JMark, he's not only led his company to success, but built systems that create stability that have carried them through even the most challenging times. In this episode, Tom talks about how he developed an algorithm for success, how to start building outcomes that business leaders want for their companies, the importance of pairing the right teams with the right technology so that technology will facilitate achievement rather than get in the way, and the importance of developing internal reports that can show you a roadmap for success. Before we get started, if you are a supply chain executive who'd like to finally put an end to information overload and get a concise, fact-based summary of key market developments and shifts, as well as sharp insights as to what is likely to impact sourcing in the coming months, then the current situation is just what you're looking for. To learn more, head on over to thecurrentsituation.net. That's thecurrentsituation.net, where you can find all of the details. And of course, I will put the links in the show notes for this episode. Now let's talk with Tom about how we can structure our companies for greater success. Thomas, I really appreciate your taking the time to come on the show. I think that some of what you've been working on and that you've achieved is very interesting, and I think that a lot of people would really, really be interested in finding out exactly what you've done, how you've done it. You say that you've developed what you refer to as an algorithm for success.
Yes.
I mean, who wouldn't want to get their hands on that?
Well, I hope that's the case. Our goal is to share it with as many people as possible because we, over almost 30 years in business, we've certainly skinned our knees and ran into many obstacles along the way. And so we wanted to share the components that we learned so that people wouldn't have to go through some of the same challenges.
Oh, that's really excellent. And I think that just about anybody who's either starting out in business or even just starting a new project, there's always things that you get wrong that you wish someone had told you in advance. So I think it's wonderful that you've managed to sort of take all of this learning and experience and sort of codify it, if I can use that word.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that that's the case. The algorithm is kind of built on the foundation of how you build an intentional business, how you put the right structure in place to ensure that you can create safety, that you can create stability, that you can have the right culture, you have the right people around you, even that you want to spend so much time with in order to get the outcomes that you want.
So how do you do it? How does it work? How is it structured?
Yeah, well, the fundamentals are based on starting with really good leadership. And I think that when we get into business, we have a tendency to think that because I've started the organization or because I've built the organization, that automatically casts me into a leadership light and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. And the truth is, most of us really don't know what we're doing. We're not very good leaders when we first start out. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about that and also giving people permission that if it's okay if you're the CEO or the principal in an organization, if you don't want to be the face of the organization or if you don't want to be, kind of the chief culture officer inside the organization, it's okay to bring somebody alongside to run that for you. I've known many people over the years that are attorneys or engineers, and it's very unnatural for them to be cultural leaders, and they need somebody to help kind of pick up that baton and run with it. And I feel like that we don't always get permission to do that in our worlds, and we should, and candidly, we owe it to our team to make sure that we have the right leadership in place, so that we can serve the teams that are serving our clients and serve the teams that are helping us to be successful. And so when we really get good at that, there are some components associated with leadership that drive success. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about that and how to have courageous conversations and what it means to stand up strong as a leader and lead from the front and set an example that people are proud to work with. And then from there, that with that being kind of the foundation or the overarching theme of everything, we go into product, and then from product we go to strategy, and then we go into the growth engine, and then we go into model and people and operations and process.
Wow.
And so all of those are the components that we need, and they feed on one another. There's a reason that they're in that order. And it can be a little bit, it can seem a little bit overwhelming, but in the book, I spent a lot of time to try to make it as simple as possible to help people to understand it and get the most out of it.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting framework. Do you have any examples of any of these things that you can share that would, sort of put it into perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the things that we figured out early on is, we developed a services product, and a lot of people, and including ourselves, we didn't really understand that even though it's a service, it's a product.
Right.
A product has a start and an end date, and a product is actually a promise, and it correlates to your brand. And so you have to really define what that is. And when we first started, we didn't have good corners on it. And it was like, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah. The answer to everything was kind of yes.
Right.
But that created a lot of gray, and that created a lot of ambiguity, and then later frustrations for our team. And so we needed to know exactly what our product is and how much it costs to deliver that product so that we can price it appropriately to achieve the long-term goals and outcomes that we want as an organization. And so there's a methodology there that helps you to do that then folds into the strategy. Once you know your product and the costs associated with delivering that product, then it becomes for the business owner, well, how many of those do I need to sell over what period of time to get the overall value in the business that I want, so that I can retire, so that I can exit, and so that I can do all of those things. And it wasn't until we were probably in business for 10 years before we started to probably get an appreciation for how hard that is to
Right.
really get the whole executive team aligned, or the leadership team aligned around where we're going to go and how fast we're going to need to move in order to get there. And then what kind of a sales engine, what kind of a growth engine did we need to have in place in order to create those outcomes?
Yeah, that's not easy to do when it's a service. I mean, it's tough when you have a product because, of course, cost of materials and so on can change all the time, as we've seen most recently. But
Very
when
much.
it's a service, right, it's really hard to put those boundaries up and calculate all of that.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And it takes some accounting ninjas in order to
Right.
help you to get the truth of that. And so that's why we built it in that order, so that you go product, strategy, growth engine, and then right after that is the financial model, so that you know how to structure the business, you know how much you can spend on sales and administrative costs or service delivery costs, so that you can achieve, what we call a safety in the business, or profits,
Right.
EBITDA, cash in the bank. And I tell our team all the time that we have to plan and structure the business, because we know that at some point winter is coming.
Right.
There's going to be downturns and there's going to be challenges. And if you create safety in the business, you don't have to make those like, oh my gosh, scared reactions. You don't have to make those radical decisions. It gives you some runway to make a very intentional decision, so that you can serve the team and make sure that you're not putting the business at risk.
That is such a good point. And I really think that the last couple of years with the pandemic has, been proof of that particular concept, because a lot of people were on an uptick, and people, when you're on an uptick,
Mm-hmm.
you tend to, you believe in your own immortality, so to speak, right? You don't think that it's ever going to not be as good or growing as fast until one day it's not. And
That's correct.
yeah, a lot of people in businesses, large and small, did not have that cushion, so to speak, right? That would enable them to continue to survive, regroup, and figure out what to do next. So I think that's an incredibly important point.
Yeah, it has made all the difference in the world for our organization. I was talking to a financial advisor friend of mine recently, and he said that the younger generation that has been in the stock market for the last 5 years has been like, "Oh, this is easy. It just always goes
Right.
up." And then over the last quarter, obviously, it's been a switch, and that has changed. And I think that your point about that we kind of don't have a perspective of our own mortality there, I think it's very accurate, but we have to have the mature perspective in business that those days are going to come. And we have to know how much time are we going to need to adjust? How big is our organization? How hard is it to turn the ship around,
Right.
to turn the Titanic sometimes? And the bigger the business, the more safety you need in order to make good informed decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, do you, and I know it's difficult because obviously every business is different and there's so
Mhm.
many variables, but are there any general guidelines on that, or is it really too business specific?
I think ideally 6 months of cash is awesome. It's
Right,
really really hard. It's easy to say and really hard to do. We started off with a goal of having 2.5 months worth of operating cash in the bank
right,
after you account for down payments and like taxes and things like that you've got to set aside. We wanted to have 2.5 months. That was our first goal, and we worked and we worked and we worked until we built it, and then it's just continually progressed for us. So I think it's a kind of a 10-year march or a long-term march, if you will,
right,
with a goal of creating that. And for us, it was important to communicate that to the entire organization that we were doing that we were
right,
building cash because we knew these things were coming at some point. We obviously didn't know when,
right.
but when the pandemic hit and we had safety in our business, I was able to stand in front of the organization and say, "Nobody worry, your jobs are safe. We're going to get through this because we have been planning for this for years."
Wow.
And the relief that came out of the organization was instantaneous, and everybody could take that sigh of relief. It's like, okay, so now what? And then we
Right.
were able to put a good strategic plan together.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point there because when you have these crises hit, and as you said, sooner or later they'll come because everything is cyclical, but the fact that you could then say to people, don't worry, your jobs are safe, mean that they don't have to deplete their energetic resources, so to speak, worrying about whether they have a job, and they could focus on how do we turn the ship around, as you were saying.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And you want their minds sharp, and you want them to feel safe and confident. And it's a little bit like, one of the things that we focus on as an organization is providing really really good and powerful healthcare for our team, and insurance and the things that are right around that. Because when you go through those really challenging health times in your life, you don't want to worry about money.
Right,
You want to focus on getting better, and
right.
so it's like, where do you want your team to focus their energy? And so if you can take away the stress and the burden of in any given situation, then they can put their energy on helping you to make the right decisions in business, or them to make the right decisions in their life for the challenges that they're dealing with. And so we absolutely believe in that intentionality and focus that it gives us permission to do when we're not in panic mode.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of companies have lost sight of that over the years, right? Because we've been in an era where everything has been focused really on growing that top line, being the next unicorn, right? Having these
Right.
massive IPOs. So everything was really top line focused, oftentimes at the expense of everything else. So I think that it's interesting that you're taking a very different perspective, a long-term perspective of building stability into your business by using your particular algorithm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. We take a lot of pride in it from that perspective. We believe that safety gives us permission to innovate. It gives us permission to serve. It gives us, and we don't have to play the short game.
Right.
There's no reason to. We believe that the small business can save the world, and it may
Yes.
sound a little hokey, but in a time where there's turmoil and there's frustrations, and the way that people are kind of, I would almost describe, torn apart in the
Right.
politics, divisive nature of things. I think that we can create the stability and the fun and the joy that people need in their lives, and there's no reason that we shouldn't do that.
I think I just couldn't agree with you more on that. I really think that we have come to overlook the incredibly important role that small business plays, particularly, as you said, in stabilizing an economy, right? Because all of the excitement and the hype and the glamour is sort of around what you might call celebrity corporations, whether they be on the cutting edge of technology or they just become massive or whatever the case may be. And they have a role to play, but, they end up hitting a stumbling block at some point, because everyone does. Not saying that management of those companies is bad, but sooner or later, right? Circumstances sometimes do you in. And then when they go down, it takes down such a massive swath of the entire economy, right? Everyone in their company, everyone in all the support companies that live off of supplying them. So it's really, as you're pointing out, the small business where you can afford to have a couple fail and it doesn't wipe everybody out. So, but it's overlooked, right? Because it's the aggregate of so many small contributors.
Yes, you've nailed it. I couldn't agree more. And when you have situations like we've seen recently, where you have these unicorns that have these billion-dollar valuations, as you pointed out, and the economy corrects, and they realize that those companies are way overvalued, and you take $400 million or $500 million away from the value of those businesses. I mean, there are lives that are devastated as a part of that. And that's not healthy for anyone. And so by creating the stability in the small business and making sure that we're doing it well, and we're using good methodologies, the algorithm and things like that, to ensure that safety is there, that people are protected, and that we're providing a great service to our clients, the outcomes are very positive for the entire country.
Yeah, I think so. I'm really hoping that at some point the value of small business will be a little bit more prioritized, shall I say.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, you talk about building up to outcomes that business leaders want for their companies. How do you suggest people go about this? What steps do you think people should take? I think that you approach it from a very interesting point of view.
Well, I think that small business owners have a tendency to think that tomorrow there's always going to be a rainbow. There's always going to be an exit strategy. There's always going to be some mechanism for them to realize the value in their business. And what made me kind of nervous over the years is I saw business after business after business, or business owner after business owner, get into their late 50s and early 60s and realize that they had a business that they had run well for many years and had optimized it so that they had minimized taxes, and therefore the business really was worth nothing. And so when they got ready to exit, they had nothing to sell because they had run it down to, a zero EBITDA, zero, profit margin at the end of the year. So they didn't pay taxes. And the truth is, if you want to have a business that somebody else wants to buy, it has to be able to be sustainable without the business owner. And so the point is to build it so that it can run independent of the business owner, so that it can be transferred to someone else and that they're willing to pay for it, and that it makes a return on investment, just like you expect out of the stock market.
Right.
And so to get there, I think you really have to know your numbers. You have to really understand how the financial model works. Every business has its own levers that need to be pulled in order to create better gross margins and to invest in sales and marketing and doing those kind of things. By doing that, then it gives you the ability to see how the future of the business can evolve. And then I suggest going offsite and having an independent facilitator to help you to get really clear about that, to get the leadership team on the same page, so that everybody sees that is critical to the long-term success of the business.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you make, because you're right. That is one of the sort of Achilles heels of a small to medium-sized business, particularly when, the owner of the company owns most of it, runs the whole thing, right? Or it's a family business, but there really is just one person in charge or only one or two. And you're right, you do get to the point where succession and so forth hasn't been planned for. There's not a lot of planning for what happens next.
Yeah, and the good and bad of what's going on with modern medicine is that once people retire, it used to be that would be, maybe a 5 to 10 year runway. And
Right.
now you're talking 20, 25, maybe 30 or 40 years worth of runway that you've got to have built into that. So you have to build enough value in the business that it can sustain the lifestyle that you want to have for the rest of your life. And that's really challenging. And so it requires some ninja skills to put the right components together within the model.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Now, if we shift over a little bit to technology, because I think technology has become a buzzword for every company, and it is important to be able to grasp onto new technology, utilize it, right, to give yourselves a competitive advantage. But I think that in some cases, it's easy just to say, oh, if it's a tech solution, we'll grab it, right? And not really be thinking about whether that solution is helping you get to your goal or getting in the way of your people getting to their goal. Can you talk a little bit about that? You mentioned pairing the right teams with the right tech.
Yeah, it's so critical. Over the years, we've seen that what has happened is teams have become the slave to the technology instead of the technology serving the people. And so as you start to develop that strategy of where you want to go and how you want to get there and how you want your team to behave and the promises that you want to make to your customers, then you pick the technology and solutions and customize it so that it works for your business. And there's so many people who buy the off-the-shelf product or a product that is designed specifically for their industry, but the average business only uses about 30% of the capabilities of the software that they buy. And so our challenge to our clients is we'll put a system owner in place, put a subject matter expert in place to learn the full capabilities of the products that are out there, the ones that you have in the business, and figure out how they serve the people in your company so that they can serve your customers and create better outcomes. That instantly creates efficiencies in the business. It creates confidence in the business. And we describe it in a way that organizations, when it comes to their technology, if you try to innovate inside your business without a stable foundation of technology, it's putting chaos on top of chaos.
Right.
So it's absolutely critical that you really build a stable, safe, secure foundation in your technology, and then you bring the components in that allow you to innovate. And as a part of that innovations, then that's how you get the competitive edge. That's how you increase the value in your business. And it kind of gives your teams a little bit of permission to be creative too. And that's always a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Do you find, and I know every company is a different case, but in general, amongst clients that you've worked with, do you find that companies err on the side of having too little investment in technology, or do you see more of this sort of bright, shiny object syndrome, so to speak, where it's like if it's new and it's tech, we're just going to, throw it on top of what we're doing and not really thinking about, does it serve, what's our end goal, and is this going to be the right technology to help us get there?
Yeah, really good question. The answer is what we find is people invest in the wrong places. So they end up having to support too many applications, and they didn't properly invest in business continuity and stability and backup and disaster recovery and those kinds of things, or in training. People underestimate the value of investing in training so that people can maximize the capabilities of the tools that they've got. And so sometimes it's underspending. Oftentimes it leads to having to overspend on technology because they've made it either too complicated or it's become a bolt-on. It's like a house that you've done an add-on addition 15 times. And
Right.
so it's like walking through a maze. And that's the way people's technology oftentimes look when we get involved. They didn't take a pause in a moment to actually create that intentional strategy so that the technology serves the business. It's like, oh, well, we need this thing. And so we go buy the shiny thing and we bolt it on, and there's some more servers and there's some more security requirements and more training that we have to do. And all of a sudden you have this cobbled together mess of a house that doesn't make any sense at all because it didn't have any original architecture.
Right. Yeah, that's very, very true. I can picture what you're saying, and it's so often the case. You get sold some system that's going to do this or that, and you run out and get it, and it doesn't really integrate with other things that you have. And so you're right, it just becomes a tangled mess.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, what do you feel are some of the key tools that can help leaders make better decisions? We talk about a lot of things that have to do with decision making and planning. Are there tools that you feel that are important for leaders to either work with or to utilize in some way or another?
Yeah, I think first is the right mentality and focus as a business leader. We're emotional creatures, and we have a tendency oftentimes to lead with our emotions. And what I share in the book is that it's absolutely critical that leaders fall in love with the truth, even when they don't like it.
Right.
And sometimes we don't always seek the truth and fight for the truth in order to make those decisions. And so getting to the facts, which means data. And so when it comes to the tools that the business leaders need, it's the right business intelligence, it's the right reporting, it's the right capabilities. And in the model section of Adapt or Die, I share that, the traditional financial statement, as an example, doesn't help a CEO to make decisions about how to improve gross margin, or how to, are we investing in sales and marketing right? Or are we getting a return on sales? Or, like those things, those truths don't come out from a traditional financial statement. And so my challenge for the business leaders is to put the reports and the capabilities and structures in place so that the data makes the decisions very easy and intentional. Like we're overspending in sales and not getting a return. The goal of a growth engine should be when you push on the gas, it goes. So if I put $1 in, I'm going to get $1.50 out. I put $1 in, I'm going to get $2.50 out. And if you learn all of a sudden, which we did years ago, that I'm putting $1 in and I'm getting 90 cents out, it's like, well, this isn't working very well.
Right.
So really structuring your reporting and your costs in such a way that you can get to those truths really makes all the difference in the world. And it took us a year and maybe 18 months to get our data healthy enough so that we could see actually what was going on inside the business, so we knew which levers to pull.
That's very interesting. I think that one of the areas where people get stuck on that is the timeline. In other words, as you said, you want to know, if I'm putting $1 in, am I getting more than $1 back? But what happens? How do you figure in things like timelines where you have to invest for a while, particularly in sales, right? In building up sales initially, whether it's a new company or a new product. How do you know how much longer you should be putting those dollars in before you, because usually it does take a while. It can take a year easily to start to, see that payback.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't be more correct. It's a big challenge for a lot of organizations. And because it's so industry specific, I would probably recommend working with a benchmarking group for your industry to get that. It's oftentimes a relatively inexpensive investment to make. There are some really expensive benchmarking houses, but you can usually get the data that you need for a reasonable investment so that you can see what the benchmarks are in the industry. In our industry, as an example, you should get 2.5 times the cost of your sales department back about every 2 years. And so it's a 24-month cycle for us to get those things turned around. And that's challenging for some organizations to kind of weather that long process, if you will. Our goal is to get it down below a year so that we're able to realize that quicker, but we're not there yet. It takes a strategic effort. So it definitely depends on what you're selling. If you're online selling, retail products and things like that, and you've got to calculate in your inventory costs and your labor costs to get that out and those things. And so it's not an easy formula by any means, which is why it's so important to get the right benchmarking company to help you to get an appreciation for that.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You need to get accurate benchmarks. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going. It's like having a map that's out of date.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Or a map that you're having to draw along the way.
Right. Even worse.
Yeah, exactly. And we were fortunate to be able to work with some just incredible people in our industry, and it made all the difference for us in the world to be able to know how to get there faster. And once we had that map, it changed our world. It was like, oh, well, we're way overspending over here and we're underspending over here, and we don't have enough safety in this area of the business. And so it's absolutely transformative.
Wow. It's so interesting, right, to hear your perspective on things. And I really thank you so much for so many insights that you've shared and really sort of shining a different light on how you might effectively run a business. How can people find you? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people want to get your book. I think a lot of people want to reach out to you. How can they connect with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to adaptordie.com.
Okay.
The book is on Amazon. We're going to put it on the website soon. But right now, the only place to buy it is on Amazon. But if you want to reach out and connect with us in social media or anything, the hub of all of that is adaptordie.com.
Okay. That's wonderful. I'm going to put that in the show notes. And of course, that'll also be over on our podcast website, seatpodcast.com. So people will be able to find it. A lot of times when people are listening to things, it's a little bit difficult to try to remember, right? Some of these URLs, but we'll make sure that everything is in the notes. And I really want to thank you again for taking the time. It's just been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the chance to come on. I'm very grateful. Look forward to hearing this one and the next show after that.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to A Seat at the Table. If you enjoyed this episode or learned something from it, I'd love to hear about it. Your feedback powers this show. If you'd like to support the show, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Also, share episodes you found valuable on LinkedIn or other social media and call out your biggest insight or takeaway from the program. And don't forget to tag me, Jane Singer. I love seeing which episodes you liked best. And if you have time, please leave a review on any of the major podcast channels. Also, don't forget to check out our website, seatpodcast.com. That's SEAT podcast.com. You'll find all kinds of bonus content there, including free ebooks, discounts on apps and other products, as well as a preview of upcoming podcast episodes. You can also send a message with any thoughts, feedback, or suggestions there, and yes, I will read them. Thank you for joining me today and supporting the show. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in our next episode of A Seat at the Table.